All right. Question 2 says there are 8 marbles that are blue and 7 red marbles in a bag. Julia pulls 2 marbles at random from the bag first. What's the probability that she first pulls a blue marble and then a red marble? Okay? So, we find probability, we need to compare part to whole. Okay? And the first thing we're trying to find is blue marble. How many blue marbles are in there? 8 blue marbles. So I'm going to just write 8 right here. How many total marbles are in the bag? Yeah?
15.
15. Now, that event happened. We have an 8 out of 15 chance. A little over 50% chance of getting that marble. Is that correct? Okay. Now, we're going to pull in and grab the next marble. What marble do we want to get?
Red.
A red. How many reds are there?
7.
Okay. How many marbles are in the bag when we try to pick that red one? Nathan? 14. Now, the idea on this, when we want to find out the chance of an event happening when there's 2 things like this happening, we take the probability of the first and multiply it by the probability of the second. Okay? Now, if we were to estimate this, we could say about 1/2, exactly 1/2. What's 1/2 times 1/2? 1/2 times 1/2 is, what's half of a half? 1/4, right? Our answer should be pretty close to 25% when we get done. Okay? It should be. Same thing will happen here. If we find the actual percent, we can take this percent, multiply it by that percent, and we'll get our percent chance of it happening. We have to take the 2 events, multiply them together, their likelihood of happening, and we'll find the overall probability. Okay? So, if we're going to multiply, I can use these fractions right here. But I'm going to do a little bit of work first. And I'm going to make this actually 1/2. Isn't 7/14 the same thing as 1/2? Okay? Now, I can either multiply first and then simplify, or I could simplify and then multiply. I get the same answer either way. Because if I go 8 times 1, I'm going to have 8. And 15 times 2 is 30. If I simplify before I multiply, you can see here that these are both even numbers, so I can take 2 out of each of them. If I take out 2 from my cross products before I multiply, I'll be in the simplest form. So I'm going to take 2 out of here and say 2 goes into itself 1 time. I'm going to take 2 out of 8 and say that 2 goes into 8 4 times. So now when we do this, we'd say 4 times 1 is 4. And 15 times 1 is 15. And we'd get the same answer if we did our reducing afterwards. Does that make sense to everybody? So now, 4 out of 15. Well, 4 out of 16 is exactly 1/2. Now our question is, what that we've been talking about today is, how do we get to a decimal number first? Because on our test on Monday, they could ask you to answer this question by using a decimal. They could ask you to use the, find the answer by finding a fraction in its simplest form, in which case that's the answer. Or they could say, find the answer by using a percent. Yeah. 4 by 15. Probably the easiest way, right? Okay, so can someone pull out a calculator and do 4 divided by 15? Yeah. And the 6 repeating? Okay? So it does because your calculator will round up that last digit if it deserves to be rounded up. Because the next term would be a 6 after the last digit on your calculator, it rounds it up to a 7. Same thing if you did 2 divided by 3. 2 divided by 3 will be 0.6 all the way across, and then the last digit will say 7 because it rounded it up. If we did 1 divided by 3, we'd get 0.3 repeating. That last digit would still be 3 because 3 is not enough to round it up to 4. Does that make sense to everybody? So now, how do we express this as a percent then? Yeah,
26%.
close. If we're going to say this exactly as a percent, we would go like this. Please answer that. Okay? Shh. Eyes here. So be great on the video. Your parents can actually see what, we just, I'll be there, tell them I'll be there in about 20 seconds. Okay? If they ask you to round it to the nearest percent, how would we round this to the nearest percent? I already told her that she's in Mr. Schmidt's class. Okay, don't worry about it. Not a big deal. It's the second time she called. She forgot that it's a 7-2 day. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay? If we wanted to round this to the nearest percent, what would the answer be? 27%. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we could say 27 to the nearest percent. How about if they said to round it to the nearest tenth of a percent? What would the answer be? Yep. 26.7%. That's to the nearest tenth of a percent. So there we covered all bases. The test itself will tell you what, if you're going to do a percent, they'll tell you how they want you to round the percent. Makes sense to everybody. Okay?